Hi everybody, Diane here from California Tea and Herbal, and happy National Iced Tea Month. Yes, June is National Iced Tea Month, and the story that I've always heard about how iced tea got started in the US turns out to be totally wrong, and so I'm very excited to tell you the true story. Now, I've heard that in 1904 at the World's Fair in St. Louis, a vendor there was trying to sell hot tea, but it was just too hot, and he tried making it cold, and people went crazy, and that's how it started. But no, not 1904. Let's go all the way back to 1773 in May, and the British had put a kind of a little exception for their tea merchant, the British East Indies Company, to be able to sell tea tax-free to the American colonies, and that was undercutting local merchants. Hey, does that sound familiar? Some things never change, do they? But at any rate, this kind of stuff has gone on since there was a world, probably. And so, as you all probably know, we had something called the Boston Tea Party here in December of that same year, 1773. The British didn't like it one bit. Their British East Indies Company tea was thrown overboard, and this is an act of defiance which escalated into the the war, the Revolutionary War, so the American Revolution. And that's kind of the background. Now, I kind of think also that got tea off to kind of a bad start here. It could have been the national beverage instead of coffee, which really kind of is, although tea is #2 beverage in the world after water. But you know what? People didn't give up drinking tea. Now, here's some surprising things about how iced tea got started. Okay, so as early as the late 17th century, the early 1800s, there were recipes for iced tea. Oh, this stuff's blowing right over my camera. There were recipes for iced tea in both British and American cookbooks. Funny thing is, folks, this was green tea. And today, 80% or more of tea sold in the U.S. is black and it's iced, but this was green tea, and that's kind of exciting. Well, why is that exciting to me? Because, I just like the fact that, green tea is getting so much publicity now, something, really trendy, and you got to drink green tea. They were, that was really being the popular brew here before the black tea. And so these recipes were quite interesting. Now, I picked one out, I think it was from an 1839 cookbook here. And it had a recipe where you would take the tea and you would pour 2.5 pints of the hot green tea over 2.5 cups or equal amount of white sugar, not healthy. Then you would add a 1/2 pint of sweet cream. Oh, that sounds good. And then, now a lot of these recipes, in fact probably most, were tea punches, they called them. So it was tea and liquor together. And this recipe had you finally add a bottle of claret or champagne. And then you could either serve it hot, or she said serve it ice in cold cups as well. So that's a cool one. Now, how did sweet tea start? Because the South, lives on sweet tea. Well, there's a recipe, and there's a date on that too. So the oldest sweet tea recipe in print that they know about is something called Housekeeping in Old Virginia. And again, this was green tea, and the recipe was as follows. You would take 4 cups of boiling water, 2 teaspoonfuls of green tea, and after this steeped, you would let this sit all day. She said if you were going to drink this iced, then let it sit all day, and then in the evening, the sediment's all gone to the bottom. You take goblets and you fill them with ice, and you put in 2 teaspoonfuls of sugar. Now this tea had to be pretty weak. I mean, 4 cups of water and 2 teaspoonfuls of tea. So now you're pouring this weak, kind of lukewarm, room temperature tea, green tea, over the ice and the sugar, and that was the first printed sweet tea recipe. Now the first black tea recipe came, let me see, a few years later in 1884. Now, how did iced tea kind of hit the mainstream? Well, again, it wasn't at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis that I'd always heard, but it was actually, there was there was iced tea being sold in 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair. And this was being about $2,000 worth of lemonade and iced tea was sold by a vendor there. And then in 1904, this story that I'd always heard about, it was a hot day, and so the gentleman iced the tea, and that's when people got all excited about it. In fact, at that 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, there were quite a few other vendors, restaurants and so forth, that had booths and stalls that had iced tea on their menus. So now let's go inside, and I'm going to point out, or I'm going to actually show you maybe about 3 of my personal favorite iced teas and tell you how to make them. Okay friends, here are 3 of my very favorite iced tea selections. For herbals, and they're not teas, but hey, let's throw it in. This is Blueberry Rooibos. It is an herbal from South Africa, loaded with antioxidants, and this one has real blueberries and some other beautiful things in with it. And as you see, I've thrown in a few frozen blueberries for garnish and taste. Now next is my favorite green iced tea, and it's just such a classic. That's Moroccan mint. And this one also has a little jasmine in it, and as you see, I topped it with a fresh sprig of mint from my own garden. Now, number 3, a total black iced tea classic. That's Southern Sweet Tea. Ours is made with a strong Chinese black tea called Golden Yunnan. All these teas and herbals are on calteas.com, and as you can't see, I added 3 to 4 packets of stevia for 16 to 20 ounces of iced tea. Now, most traditional Southern sweet tea recipes use about 1/4 the amount of sugar as the liquid, but you can sweeten it to your taste. Okay friends, that's our show on iced tea for June Iced Tea Month, a special on iced tea, and I'm going to enjoy our version of Southern Sweet Tea, which I'm going to call California Iced Tea. Now, if you don't know our background, you can go to calteas.com and click on our story. And within that story, you can click on our Yelp reviews. And when we had our store here in the town that we live in, we had 5-star reviews, and we really think that a lot of that came because we tried to just make our customers insanely fall in love with tea. One of the big comments was, I never knew tea could taste like this. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, please like, please share, and I'll see you next time. I'm going to enjoy our version of sweet tea, California sweet tea. All the rest, and I'll put the recipe for this in the description too. Bye for now. Yum. Oh, please make it by the glass, not by the pitcher. You'll be glad you did, and it's so easy.